Alrighty, in this video what I want to do is put together another prefab dialog box, in this case a confirmation dialog. So this dialog, what I'm wanting to do is have it have the ability to have potentially three buttons, a positive button, a negative button, and a cancel button, and have those buttons be able to be shown and hidden depending on what the circumstance is. So this is another thing that we would be using a lot of in the future of building up the lobby system and other UI elements, so I thought it would be a great idea to get this out of the way. So if we jump over into our garbage dialog prefab scene, we see we have our awesome alert dialog. The way I'm going to implement the confirm dialog is I'm going to implement it in its own class. It's not going to be related to the alert dialog. And the reason for that is, although they're very similar in functionality, and we probably could do something where we write the confirm dialog as inheriting from the alert dialog, we might run into issues with the Fluent API, where the methods on the alert dialog, the sort of Fluent methods that return itself, at the end of it are going to be returning objects statically typed to the alert dialog. So by redefining them in the confirm dialog, we don't have to worry about that. We could use some generics trick to not have to, or not have that problem, or redeclare in our confirm dialog, like do a new member for each, use the new keyword for each one of the existing methods. But at that point, we are basically just, well, reusing the same functionality anyway, so we might as well just make it its own thing. So let's go ahead and get started. So for this alert dialog, what I'm going to do, since we're in Unity right now, I do want to write the class first, but I will go ahead and do this anyway since we're already here. For this alert dialog, I'm going to go ahead and come up here to game object, and I'm going to say break prefab instance, and then I'm just going to change its name to confirm dialog. So we're going to be using the same sort of basic game object, just a copy of the alert dialog for creating this prefab. And then over into our buttons, we have our dismiss, and I'm just going to select that and hit Control D twice, and I'm going to rename them. So on the left, I think I'm going to go ahead and have the left button be the positive button. I'm going to have the middle be the neutral button. And I managed to misspell that, so let's spell this properly. Neutral. And then on the right, we'll have the negative button. And we can go ahead and change the text too, so it's clear what we have here. Positive, positive, neutral, and negative. So, like a positive might be like okay, a negative might be, or the positive might be yes, a negative might be no, and a neutral might be cancel or, you know, undecided or whatever. So yeah, you can rearrange these buttons however you want. I'm not too concerned about the visual representation right now, where we are in this code. So let's just go ahead and save that out. And on the confirm dialog, before I forget, because this is something I would totally forget, I'm going to remove the alert dialog behavior from it completely. Now I'm going to hop over into Visual Studio. And over here, I'm going to go into prefabs, and I'm going to create a new class called confirm dialog. And I guess the easiest way here to do this would be to put these two side by side. They're very similar in a lot of ways. I'm just going to go ahead and take all this code, copy and paste it. And then also we have to make sure that we inherit from prefab behavior. And let's go ahead and get our imports in. So we're going to import in Unity Engine and Unity Engine UI. Now what we're going to do is we are going to change the instances of alert dialog to our awesome confirm dialog. So I'm going to come over here, and for our onDismissed, I will go ahead and do, yeah, let's leave the onDismissed event. And then for our setCanDismiss, actually no, we don't need to worry about onDismiss for this. So I'm just going to remove all references to the concept of being dismissible, because the confirm dialog box isn't dismissible. You have to select either the positive, the neutral, or the negative button. So I'm just going to change the signatures here on our message and our title. And then for close, we simply need to remove the references to onDismissed, as well as our close in. I don't know if I necessarily need the functionality to close in on this. It's not like we're ever going to show an amount of time, a confirm dialog for X amount of time, like what we would do with the alert dialog. So I'll go ahead and nuke all that. And then I'll keep the onDestroy with the model disposable. Okay, so now our confirm dialog does the same things as our alert dialog, but we have a couple more things to do here. So instead of a close button, I'm going to go ahead and make this a positive button. And we're also going to have a public button neutral button. And we're also going to have a public button negative button. And I think that's all good. So now what we need to do is we do need a way to set the text of the positive, neutral, and negative buttons. So I'm going to go ahead and say public confirm dialog set button text, and we'll have string positive text, string negative text, and string neutral text. And then for this, this is going to get a little repetitive, but it's such a low amount of repetition that I'm not going to worry about factoring this into a method. Well, actually, we could. We could use an inner method here. Before I do that, I want to do some validation here. Basically, the idea of this method is you set the text, and then you can either pass in text or null into each three of these parameters. So a null would indicate that that button shouldn't appear, because sometimes you might just want a positive and a negative, right? And then sometimes you might also, or sometimes you might want a positive, negative, and a neutral. But we need at least one of them at all times. So I'm going to say if positive text is null, and negative text is null, and neutral text, oh, come on, neutral text is null, so if all three are null, I'm going to throw an argument exception and say, please provide at least one of the button texts. Okay, then I'm just going to write a really quick internal function here. I'm just going to say action, and it'll take in a button and a string, and it's going to be called, I don't know, set button text, and we'll do button and text. And what this method is going to do, of course, this is an internal private method, or a private method, quote unquote. It's really just a delegate attached to a lambda. It's funny, the syntax actually, I believe, is being proposed in C# 7, where we'll actually be able to create nested functions, nested methods. And I think that's going to be really cool and clean up the syntax quite a bit. But for now, I'm just doing this to avoid repetition, because each three of the buttons have the same behavior. I'm simply going to say if string dot, or how about if text is null, then button game object set active false. Otherwise, actually, I'm going to reverse this. If it's not null, then set it to true, and then say button dot text. Oh, right, we have to get the remember in the new system. In the new UI system, the button game object doesn't actually have a reference to the text box within it. So we need to go ahead and find this component, this text component. But fortunately, that's really simple to do. All I have to do is say button.find, or sorry, button game object, or no, button get, how did I forget this method? Get component in children, and we'll use the generic form of that, text, and then I'll say dot text equals text. Otherwise, I'm going to set the button to buttons being active to false. So now we simply have to say set button text on positive button, positive text, and then copy this 3 times, and we'll do negative button, negative text, and then finally we'll do our neutral button, neutral text. Oops. Make sure you spell all of this properly, because I did not mean to do that. Neutral text. So be sure to check to make sure you're passing in the right text, the right buttons. But again, it just cuts down on the repetition a little bit. And then we can simply say return this for our confirm dialog. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce a enumeration here. So I'm going to exit a full screen. I'm not sure if I should introduce this. I don't know where I should put this enum. I could put this enum inside the confirm dialog. I guess I will do that. So here at the top of the class, I'm going to create a nested enumeration. It's simply going to be dialog result, and it'll be positive, negative, and neutral. So the idea here is we're going to be using a deferred in order to be able to hook into when the user has selected an item. So what I'm going to do here is after I create my modal disposable, which is a kind of a fun word to say, I'm going to say private deferred. So remember that pulls in a using statement at the top of the dialog result, and I'll call this underscore result deferred. So the result deferred will be considered completed once the user has pressed one of these buttons. And then, of course, on my on ready, I do want to initialize this. Or let's think about this. I guess that would be the best way to go about it. So on my on ready, I'm going to say result deferred equals new deferred of dialog result. And at the moment, it is a non-resolved deferred. So it's just going to be sitting there. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a couple methods here. Now, the first method I'm going to be is simply going to be a public deferred of dialog result. And it's simply going to be confirm. And confirm is simply going to return deferred. So the idea here is the way to get access to the result deferred is once you're done configuring the button, setting its button text or its title or its message or whatever, you can simply call the confirm method and you'll get the deferred back. That'll be resolved when the user has selected an item. But we need a way for the user to select an item. So I'm going to create a couple public methods. One will be set result, and it'll take in a dialog result. Set result is simply going to do result deferred dot set result is valid, null error, and then result as passed in by the parameter. So that's our set result method. Then what I'm going to do is, what are you yelling at me about? Oh, I've been writing too much JavaScript. I forgot to put a return type there. Okay, then I'm going to do something silly. I'm going to say set result int result, and this is simply going to invoke set result cast to dialog result result. Now, the reason I'm doing this is I want to be able to invoke this method from Unity's UI, and Unity's UI event system won't allow me to attach a event handler that has an enumeration as its parameter. So, you know what? Maybe that's changed since I wrote that in the earlier bit, because it seems like it would be a really cool thing to be able to wire up an event with a enum parameter. So let's try this out first now that this class is complete. And if I can't wire up the events properly, then I'll come back and uncomment out that method. So let's jump back into Unity here, and we shouldn't get any compilation errors, and we don't, which is nice. Then on my confirm dialog, I'm going to simply say add component confirm dialog. And before I add any of these game objects here, I'm going to try to wire up that event. So on my positive button, I'm going to come down here to on click, and I'm going to drag up my confirm dialog onto the game object. And then I'm going to come down here on the function, select confirm dialog, and you know what? I do not see set result anywhere in that list. So it's not picking that up. So Unity does not allow us to have those methods. So that means I have to come out here and re-uncomment that out. And before we move back into Unity, because we're going to be passing in an integer instead of an enumeration, we got to come here and make sure that we have each one of these indexes down. So positive is 0, negative is 1, neutral is 2. I can make this a little bit more clear by doing that. I rarely ever set explicit enum values here, but because we are going to be using them within Unity like this with numbers, I think it's a little bit more clear if we do it that way. So let's move that off to the side and come back here to our positive button and scroll down once Unity gets its act together. Jump over here to function, confirm dialog, and we should have a set result int, and we do. So we can click on that, and the positive is indeed 0. Now let's do our neutral. So same sort of deal. We take our confirm dialog, we drag it over into the game object target in our inspector for the button click handler. We come down here to confirm dialog, and we set result, and this is the neutral, and neutral is 2. And then for our negative button, we do the exact same thing. Confirm dialog, set result, and negative is 1. So now we have our events wired up. So back into our confirm dialog, we now have to set all these game objects. So our message is simply our message. Our title is simply our title. Our title container is the title panel. The positive button is, of course, the positive button. The neutral button is the neutral button. And the negative button is the negative button. So yeah, that's pretty much it. You know, actually, I'm thinking a little bit right now. I think it would actually be a little bit more appropriate if we assign these event handlers in our code. And that would actually clean things up a little bit and not have to rely on that set result. I just realized there's a much better way to do this. Also, this dialog panel isn't centered. So please stay centered. Or is it centered? I don't know. Let's go ahead and remove those event handlers. I have a better idea for this. So go away. How do I kill you? Go away. There you go. And I guess there's a bug here where I have to hit the plus button first, and then I can hit the minus button. Okay, so remove all of those handlers there. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to jump back into the code. I'm going to take off those explicit enum values, and I'm going to nuke this set result. Sorry, I just thought about this. This would be a better way to do it. And then on the set button text, I'm going to... Oh, well, yeah, I think this would be better. Dialog result. And then we'll do result. And then for this, what we're going to do is the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do button dot... we're simply going to say button dot... because this method might be called multiple times, I'm going to say button on click dot remove all listeners. And then I'm going to say button on click dot add event listener. And for the Unity action, it's simply a delegate here. And we'll say set result, passing in the result that was passed in as a parameter. So that will go ahead and do that. And for this, now we can strongly type our dialog results. And I like being explicit with enums. You know, they are technically backed by primitive types, but when I use enums, I tend to try to really avoid assuming that or thinking about them in terms of the numbers that they are, and think more in terms of them just being their own data type like they should be. So we'll do negative here and dialog result neutral. Of course, one of the interesting consequences of this is that the event handlers are not going to be attached if you have not invoked set button text. So I think I'm going to put a handler in here on my set result method, or sorry, my confirm method, to say if we haven't set the button text to throw an exception, because that would be considered an error. This would rarely happen, but this is just a little sanity check. So has set button text. And then for this, I'm going to, on our set button text, after we get through that exception there, I'm going to say has set button text to true. And then on our confirm method, which you have to invoke the confirm method in order to get access to the dialog result. So we know the confirm method is always going to be invoked. I'm going to say if not has set button text, throw new invalid operation exception, please set button text before invoking confirm. Now there's a couple other things that we could do here just to make this prefab a little bit easier to use. So our set button text method has to be invoked each time. You know, it sets the text, it turns on or off different buttons, and it sets our click handlers. But what I want to do in addition to this is have a couple really nice little convenience methods, or maybe just one for right now, that will set up our buttons for us so we don't have to pass in the same strings all the time, because most of our confirm dialogues are going to be yes, no, or yes, no, cancel. So I'm going to say public confirm dialog, and I'll say as yes, no, and that'll simply say return set button text, passing in yes for positive, no for neutral, and null for, or no for negative and null for neutral. And then I'll say public confirm dialog as yes, no, cancel, which will be return set button text, yes, no, cancel. So this is now a handy little convenient mono behavior we have now. So yeah, let's go ahead and test it out. Before we do that, of course, we have to prefabify it. So let's jump back into Unity, let it go ahead and recompile itself here. Then I'm going to come over here and in my resources prefabs, I'm going to drag over confirm dialog. And that should be it. So preemptively, I'm going to come up, since we're already in Unity, I'm going to go ahead and load up our loader scene. And then jump back into Visual Studio, and let's jump into our master server systems login system. And for our onConnected, we're going to change this a little bit. We're simply going to say context prefabs instantiate confirm dialog. And I'm going to simply say set as yes, no, cancel. And then I'll say .confirm, and then I'll say on success result. And I'll simply say debug, which I have to pull in Unity Engine for that, debug.log, and we'll simply pass in result.result. So this is an example of the usage of our awesome confirm dialog. Of course, it's no longer var dialog because on success or confirm returns a deferred, as well as on success. So let's jump back into Unity, wait for it to recompile real quickly. hit play, and see what happens. So indeed, we do get connected to our server. We have a yes, no, cancel, or a yes, cancel, no. And if we hit no, we get negative. If we hit cancel, now we get nothing. The reason for that is that I didn't close the dialog after a result was set. So to do that, I'm going to jump back into Visual Studio, and in my confirm dialog, I'm going to do a couple things here. I do want to go ahead and create a close method, which we already have a close method. So close just destroys the game object. I want to say close, and I'll say result deferred set result is valid. Well, we could indicate if the dialog is closed prematurely, we have two options, or three options here. We could set the result to have an error. We could set the result to cancel, or we can set the result to neutral. But the only way that this close method is ever going to be invoked if it was invoked programmatically. So I think setting the result of the deferred to false and the error to dialog was closed is a better choice, because now we can hook onto the onFail method of the deferred to detect when programmatically our confirmed dialog was closed, which might come in handy, might not, I don't know. Either way, when the close method gets invoked, I do want to set the result. Now what we need to do is on our set result method, so let's scroll up to our set result method here. I do want to go ahead and say destroy game object. I don't want to do close here. If I did close here, that would set the deferred to have an error. So I just want to go ahead and completely destroy the game object. So let's jump back into Unity and hit play and see what happens. So now we have this. If I hit cancel, it says neutral. Come back up here. If I hit yes, it says positive. Come back here and play again. And if I do no, it says negative. So there you have it. Obviously, this is just, we don't set any titles here, so we could come here and make sure that's working as well. So we can say set title to do you want to do the thing. Set message, the thing is awesome, choose wisely. Come back here, hit play. And as we see, our title is working just fine. So it's a very, very rudimentary very rudimentary prefab, just like our alert dialog, but it's going to give us a lot of, it's going to be useful in a lot of different situations, especially during the development of this. And in the future, obviously, we can come in here, make this a little prettier. We can come in here and make more specialized dialog boxes if we want to. We can do a lot of things like maybe make a list dialog box where you choose out of a list, blah, blah, blah. But the point is this is the pattern that I've kind of decided on when dealing with modal dialog boxes. Now, we haven't talked yet about non-modal dialog boxes, and that's going to be something that is going to be a lot more complicated when we get into the UI of the game, being able to move panels around and all that fun stuff. That probably won't be tied in too much to what we have in here. These are just for message boxes. You know, think the alert dialog box if you were in JavaScript, or message box if you're in WinForms. Anyway, I think that about wraps this up, so we'll see you guys in the next video.